Hello and welcome to the channel. Today, a special review of my Rolex Yacht Master reference 16622. But first, a wristwatch check. And I am wearing my Speedy Omega Speedmaster Professional from around 1985. So let's get back to the Yacht Master. So a little bit of history first. The first Yacht Master was designed in 1992. It was reference 16628 and it was in white dial and solid gold. This version that I hold in my hand is reference 16622 and it was introduced in 1999 and it was the first full steel version. So let's talk dimensions. This is a classical 40 millimeters in diameter with a height of a little bit under 12 millimeters, so a little bit thinner than the Submariner of the time, and very standard 20 millimeters in lug width and 47 lug to lug. The Yacht Master was supposed to be a redesign of the Submariner. In the early 1990s, Rolex had realized that their Submariner, here with my reference 14060, had become a luxury product. And so they wanted to redesign the Submariner with a luxury in mind. So when comparing it to an early 90s Submariner, what elements did Rolex redesign? They first redesigned the dial, which goes from a black to a platinum. Another big difference with the dial is the return of the maxi indices. As you can see, at the time, the Submariner had the classic small indices, as the Yacht Master brings back those very missed big indices from the earlier reference Submariners. Then they redesigned the bezel insert, which went from the classic stainless steel one to the much more luxurious platinum one. And last, they redesigned the case. We have all come to know and love the case of the Submariner, which is shared along many models like the GMT Masters and the Explorers, and it's a pretty basic case design. The case of the Yacht Master, it's much different. It's the case that was used in the Daytona and the Datejust, so much more dressy. The case is polished all around. You don't see any brushed surfaces. So this is seen as a much dressier version of the Submariner, almost not a tool watch. It crosses the line between a dress watch and a tool watch in the Rolex catalog. And continuing with the case, notice how the lugs angle downwards. Look at the Submariner case. The lugs do not angle, or they angle slightly downwards. It is much more visible in the Yacht Master. Then there's the bracelets. At the time, the Submariner in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, the Submariner was the quintessential tool watch, and no polished bracelet could be allowed. This is not a dress watch again, so the bracelet was fully brushed all over. In the Yacht Master, we can see that the middle links have been polished, with the outer links being still brushed. This is something that came from the Daytona models from the early 90s, and that is carried over on many other Rolex models, like the latest version of the GMT Master, for example. And this is a design that a lot of people don't like, but I do appreciate very much, because it is much more elegant. But in any case, this feels like a much more sturdy bracelet compared to the ones from the 90s in my Submariner, and even the ones from the early 2000s. Another difference with the Submariner is the rotating bezel. This bezel rotates but in both ways, because this is not a dive watch. So pretty much that is the main changes that were done to the design. And in the end, Rolex realized that they had a whole different animal. So they decided to make a whole different watch from the Submariner, and they named it the Yacht Master. So looking at this watch particularly, we can see a beautiful platinum dial with some kind of stardust. If you move it, you can see it's dynamic. The Rolex logo is printed, and the Yacht Master is there printed in red, which is matched then by the second hand that is red as well. In this version, which is from 2008-2009, the rehaut has been marked Rolex all over, as in the new references. As shared before, the bezel insert is platinum. So, positives and negatives. Well, positives first. This is a pretty watch, which was, of course, at the time, and even now, an upgrade from the already beautiful Submariner. But just the elegance. In this version, the wide face, I believe, make it appear larger. The maxi dials just give it a nice balance, and that red in the dial gives it a bit of playfulness that you don't see in the very serious Submariners. And I myself have said very bad things about this clasp. However, you have to give it to Rolex. In this configuration of this bracelet with the brushed middle lugs, what do you notice when you compare to a modern Rolex clasp? These clasps integrate beautifully with the design of the bracelet, and they are, I believe, more elegant than the modern versions. Of course, they're less secure and they feel like they're less quality, but I believe that in this model, which screams elegance, they just integrate better with the bracelet. What's more, that 100 meters of water resistance makes this a tool watch in any case, or at least a recreational watch. There's a reason why this is called the Yacht Master, because Rolex intended these for yachting. As you might be aware, Rolex sponsors many yachting events around the world, so they have a real tie with yachting, which I believe is represented by this watch, and represented beautifully at that. So beautiful design, solid package. Does this watch have it all? Can it have the Submariner beaten? Well, actually not in the eyes of everybody, because this watch is not as desirable as a Submariner. Rolex doesn't sell that many of them compared to Submariners or even GMT Masters or even now Explorers 2. So these, and I don't know why, is, I wouldn't say an unpopular watch, but it's not a watch that has yet reached a cult status. Well, that translates positively in the second-hand market, as you can have these watches, which at first in Rolex lineup are more expensive, much more expensive, significantly more expensive than the Submariner. You can have it for even lower than a Submariner. I'm struggling to find any other negative point about this watch. For me, it's a beautiful design, a beautiful watch that I can wear in any circumstance. I work in an office, so I need to wear a suit every day, so this goes very well with a suit, especially if I have some kind of red element with me, or if I'm wearing a darker gray suit. This goes very well with a gray suit. Now for the Lume video. This version has the Superluminova C3, which was used by Rolex until they started using their proprietary chromolite. But as you can see, this is very bright. A very potent lume. It might not be as long-lasting as chromolite, but it's, at least for me, it is very, very nice, very well applied. Closing thoughts of the review. In 1992, when Rolex set out to redesign the Submariner, they failed. But, as is often the case with Rolex, this failure stemmed future success. In this instance, in a new line of watches, the Rolex Yacht Master, this watch is the epitome of elegance. What's more, the fact that this watch is way rarer than, let's say, a Submariner or a GMT Master make for a much more unique and luxurious product. And that is why the Yacht Master is definitely one of my favorite Rolexes.